Welcome back to State of the Nation. Just before Mr. President went to Awka for the campaigns, their APT campaigns, he did meet with the Executive Council where he was very categorical about where we should be heading in terms of education. Let's quickly take a track on what Mr. President said to the members of the Executive Council.
Serious situation. When teachers cannot pass the exam, they are supposed to teach the children, to pass. I listen to one of Nigerians I respect. And what El-Rufai is trying to do now is exactly what that man told me about 10 years ago.
That's what Mr. President said. Mr. Ali, how deep, just listening to Mr. President, how deep do you, or how true would you say is the perception that religious education commands priority in the North than Western education?
Well, that might be true in the past, but even that is just my perception, because a lot of people, a lot of family, a lot of household where in as much as they place a lot of emphasis on acquiring religious knowledge, but also they devote a substantial amount of their resources to giving their kids sound Western education. Examples abound. You can see from nursery school, a lot of family, because of, like I said, that might have been true in the past, but that is my perception, because if you ask me, I would say maybe they are going neck to neck in some places, but in other places, no. People are appreciating Western education and they are paying heavily for it, especially those who send their kids to private schools. And if you go across the north now, from Maiduguri to Sokoto, from Kano to Benue, you can see the rise of private schools, from primary, secondary, and then even creches now you have them in abundance. So what does that tell you, Gimba? It tells you that people is mere perception. Yes, a lot of people want to have the best of two worlds, and then knowledge, whatever knowledge. Even in the two major religions, you are enjoying to acquire knowledge. Now, knowledge, not necessarily religious based, it could be secular. And then come to think of it, even what is religious education? That is the thing, because education is education. You can acquire it to have a better understanding of their faith.
If you say education is education, what are you doing, for instance? Let me use your state, for example. What are you doing to improve, say, welfare of teachers on the one hand? What are you doing to improve the learning environment? Are you in touch with non-governmental organizations, for instance, to try to improve or have teachers retrained?
Yes, that's a very good question. What is the government doing, especially the government of Emir Abubakar, the incumbent governor? Like I said from the onset, and when you devote your lion's share, the lion's share of your budget to education, mark you, Gimba, education, the life cycle of education, before you can see, it takes a long time. It's a huge investment. The gestation period is quite long, or like when you have, or like in other sectors, because to train a kid from primary to secondary and ultimately to university level, it takes time. The duration plus minus is around 20 years. But yes, a lot of resources is being devoted to teachers' welfare and teachers' training. For example, in the past, before the dawn of this administration, if you go to Bauchi now, you will see the changing narrative, like I said. Infrastructural facilities being expanded, built, new ones built, teachers' welfare, staff quarters, sanitary, health care facilities, health welfare, their own personal development, yes. And then instances where the state government would have some kind of synergy, some kind of partnership with recognized, reputable NGOs in terms of, in the field of capacity building. And also, like I said, teacher exchange program to boost their capacity. In addition to certain facilities which in due course, because of the limitation of resources at the disposal of government, Bauchi is one of the states having the biggest wage bill. We have a huge workforce. Every month, the state government devotes...
I get where you're coming from. But let me talk to Mr. Oche now. The outcome of the competency test, let's focus on that a little bit more, has prompted the state government, the Kaduna state government, to announce the replacement of these 22,000 teachers who failed that examination woefully, they say. This has sparked up a series of protests by the teachers and labor unions, as we did mention. They are demanding that the government to rescind its decision. Let's talk about that a little bit more. The educational structure, do you see, in this country, is it well enough to absorb a 7% budgetary allocation according to the 2018 budget?
Well, let me say, let me start from the point where you talked about 7% made as budgetary provision for 2018. What United Nations stipulation is for the budget of education should be 26%. That's what it should be in every budget. Now, not many states, I'm not sure you have up to 2 states in Nigeria that can devote up to 26% of its budget to education. But be that as it may, 7%, the federal government will have to look at its own institutions, federal-owned institutions, and see if 7% at the end of the day will be able to manage what it has. Because if you put down 26% of the national budget, I don't see how other sectors will survive. Therefore, what we need to do is to manage what we have in a microeconomic system to ensure that that 7% does the maximum for the educational sector in the federal-owned institutions. Now, when you go down to the state-owned institutions, you also need to enjoin the state governors to do about the same thing, if not much more. Because let me tell you, we cannot afford to play politics with the education of these children or the young ones, or else we will have ourselves to blame. We are breeding a generation that will, at the end of the day, you may not have this country existing if we do not invest in the education of these children. I do not know if the man in anybody who is protesting, for instance, will go and put his own child in a classroom where the teacher teaching his own ward will not be able to pass the same exam which he's giving to his own ward. That will not happen. So why do we play politics with it? Why play to the gallery? It is time for us to sit down and seriously address issues.
Mr. Ali, let me talk to Ali at this time. Ali, just to get your own thoughts about this. If you were to advise appropriately your government, where will the advice come from? Because you're already spending about 20% of your budget, your state budget, on education. Would you reach that mark of 26%?
Yeah, well, ultimately that's the goal, because like my governor repeatedly says, he is thinking about the next generation and how he is a product of public education. As you know, he's a brilliant lawyer for that matter, and product of public education. So he wants to give back what he acquired from the public. And that's why he's making this huge investment in education, which is not readily readily assessed, because if you are worried about projects now, why would you want to invest in education? People who want to invest in projects, things that they will see visibly, they want to. And mark you, what I'm about to say is not validating what is being done in other sectors. Or, you know, people want to see where you construct bridges, where you construct roads. We are doing that, but also devoting the lion's share. And ultimately, the goal is to devote as much as 30%, because he wants to leave a legacy as the governor.
Okay, I get that. I'll take that as your final words, but let me get your final words as well, Mr. Oche. What do you think is the way forward?
Thank you, Gimba. The way forward for me will be a strategic planning to ensure, first and foremost, that the quality of the teachers we bring on board at this time should be one that you must go through promotional exams to ensure, just like the governor of Kaduna State has done. That is one good way to ensure that the quality of our teachers, once we have quality teachers, be rest assured that the products will be quality as well. Secondly, our budgeting system has to be in such, I do understand how difficult it is for state governors to budget that kind of amount to education, but I still believe that they can still manage it properly and ensure that public school education is given a share, even if it doesn't get to 26% for exigency reasons, we must ensure that the percentage that goes into it does exactly that bit which it was meant to do, or which it is meant to do. And that is ensuring that you have training of teachers, you have the products being also of the students being trained, make it very competitive, and also set standards in such a manner that if you do not get to that standard, there is no compromise. According to one of my lecturers in the university, he said, book no they lie. You either pass or you fail.
Many thanks indeed. That's a good place to stop it. That's a good place to anchor. Wow. Many thanks indeed to both of you for sharing your thoughts on the challenge of education in Nigeria. Mr. Ali is the Special Advisor to the Bauchi State Governor on Media and Strategy, and Mr. Victor Oche is a former lawmaker from Delta State. And that's State of the Nation. I'm Gimba Omar. Join me tomorrow, same time, for a fresh show. Bye for now.